Keith Evans. I'm Senior Lead Designer at Red Storm Entertainment, working on The Division 2.
So Division 2, we're finally here. You guys are going from New York to Washington, D.C. So what's that transition been like for you guys as far as like designing this open world?
No, it's been huge because the first game was very faithful to New York. This time we're going full one-to-one. And what that basically means is, we're trying to be as faithful as possible to what makes DC unique, and that's a lot of open space, it's a lot of terrain, a lot of parks, just going into environments like the mall that are so much more open and 360 than what we did back in Manhattan. So it's both pushed us to kind of change the way we think about building the open world. It's changed the way we think about AI. Now they're much more aggressive. They flank around you more. They're more aware of the space. So it's had a big impact. Yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. Yeah, I noticed when we were playing, like one of the people I was playing with was talking about how when we were in the Air and Space Museum, we go into the planetarium area and they're like, "Oh, I've been in this room." Yeah. So how much research goes in to even designing like the internal areas of this game?
Yeah, a lot. So up front, once we decided on DC, there was a pretty extensive trip to the area to do research. And then Ubisoft is, I think, awesome at this type of thing. So we had a huge amount of information on all the areas put together for us to make it as authentic as possible, basically. So you're going to see, both in the open world, but also inside the missions, a lot of things that are very true to real life.
Now, as far as like trashing the place goes,
This is where it got really fun.
Yeah. You take this city that's in pristine condition, and just totally there's garbage everywhere. There's wild animals running rampant. What kind of a process is that for you guys?
So, that's also, there was a lot of research that went into that. So we talked to people, people in public works, people in all these different areas to say what would actually happen if the city shut down, if things weren't operating like they're supposed to, where would it flood? How would the city start to break down? So you would look at things like, the first game's only a couple weeks after the event. Now we're 7 months past the event. So, as you go further south near the water, that area obviously flooded really bad, so now roads are just crumbled everywhere. You'll have buildings where water pulled up on the roof and the whole thing is caved in, so now an interior has turned into this courtyard with ivy growing in. Honestly, that's where a lot of the fun came in building the space, because it wasn't just the one-to-one, it was also being creative on top of that template.
Nice. So it's kind of saying, well, this is pretty much what would happen if a disaster like this were to occur in real life.
Yeah, if everything stopped working, what would happen? And what really in real life, what happens is nature reclaims things really fast. If you're not constantly fighting back nature, it's gonna come in, right? Think about it, if you don't mow the yard for a couple weeks, right? Take that 7 months, plus torrential downpour, plus flooding, all that.
At any point in the game design, did you guys think about maybe adding like hunting mechanics or anything like that?
We spent a lot of resources on the world having wildlife, but we never went all the way into hunting mechanics. They're kind of there to fill out the space and make it feel authentic, but the focus is more on looter shooter, so that wasn't a focus for us.
Yeah, like I seem to recall in the first game there would be like stray dogs and things like that running around. This time around, so far I've had deer run out of nowhere at me.
Yeah.
I've seen raccoons picking through trash. The world itself feels a lot more alive, even though everybody's dead.
Yeah, and I think that falls into the fact of it's 7 months in the future, and we're in so much more of a natural environment, right? Like in DC, the animals are kind of rats and pigeons and the dogs that were left behind by families that had left or died. In DC, there's a huge deer population in DC, tons of hunters in DC, so they start overtaking the city. You have, there's foxes, there's vultures that are coming in and eating other animals. So it's a whole ecosystem that feels really much more alive than the first game, I think.
Nice. Now let's talk like level design and things like that. In the first game, it was a lot of a lot of, sort of underground pipes and a lot of rooftops. So how are you guys sort of spicing things up this time?
Yeah, so I think, the first thing there is the fact that this game has terrain, right? Like, when you go in, there's missions set on, Roosevelt Island, and it's totally natural terrain with trees that you're taking cover on, or trees that have been bulldozed and you're leaping over them. That changes things up a lot. I think we also learned a lot and have evolved the tools, so there's more interior spaces. Like once you go down into DZ South, it's just a space packed with huge interior spaces for you to explore, which keeps things much more varied, I think.
Yeah, the cover system, there seems to be a lot more like curves to a lot of the stuff that you can kind of hide behind, angles, things like that weren't really in the first game.
Yeah, we tried to make it like, our goal is always like, if it looks like it should be cover, you should be able to take cover on it, and it should be advantageous to you. So because DC is really different, that forced us to invest in taking cover on more natural elements. Cover on slopes works more naturally. Peeking over balconies, all those things have really evolved the cover system.
Awesome. I was joking around that if we had been the government had been shut down like another month or so, that this is probably what we'd be dealing with right now.
Luckily it's not, because I had to fly. So
you have all these like iconic locations in Washington. Is it hard to like sort of pick and choose what should be key in the game?
Yeah, I think there was some stuff that we just absolutely had to do, like placing the White House in the Boo. It's something we talked about a lot, and every time we would loop around different environments, it just kept coming back to that because it's so iconic, and it really made sense because it's such a defensible area with all these fallback measures for emergencies. But then you go into missions, and there was really we knew we had to do the Capitol. We knew we had to do a control point around some of the major monuments. But then there's also, we wanted to explore stuff that you don't get to see as much, like that mission, the Cold War bunker mission, that's a thing you don't normally get to see when you go into DC. So it was kind of a hitting the greatest hits, but also showing you some stuff that you can't just see as a tourist.
Yeah, sort of to that effect. Like when we were starting that bunker mission, you go in, there's a bunch of graffiti on the wall. There's like a Abraham Lincoln skateboarding, along one of the staircases. Is that stuff that you picked up while doing your research, or is that just stuff that you're flown in for flair?
Kind of a mix of both. There's definitely an authenticity to everything that's in the game, but we have some incredible artists, and I'm constantly blown away by the graffiti they add into these spaces, and it's all unique, and it all just has so much personality to it. So it's a little bit of both.
Nice. Now you guys have a lot of rival gangs in this game. Did you guys design sort of unique aesthetics for each gang to sort of set them apart from each other?
Yeah, there's a lot of each different faction has definitely their own pretty unique visual identity. Like the hyenas that were in the first mission, the Grand Washington mission, they have a lot of they're accompanied by this green smoke from these drugs that they're creating, and they have this really iconic green spray paint everywhere. That is kind of all designed so that from a distance you can see that's the faction that's taken over this area. Each faction kind of has that unique identity to them. So you have other factions that are much more militaristic, and then you have the Black Tusk at the end, right? That come in and take it to a whole different level with a lot more advanced weaponry, like the big dogs, and then just this very sleek black look with little pin lighting that you can pick up through fog or in darkness, and it really gives them their own vibe and kind of makes them a really signature threat.